Welcome back. Today we're going to do a little chat on the Lime Ears Terra. So first I want to thank Lime Ears for putting a few of their sets out on tour. This happens to be one of them. I have two other ones, which I will get to. But this happened to be the first one that I pulled out of the box, and very, very nice. I think in addition to the kind of lime green metal shell, which is what's actually a little deceptive about this one is it's a lot of metal, but it's actually very light in hand. It's probably aluminum. So it's definitely a lighter weight metal, and it definitely kind of caught me off guard how lightweight it is. And you do get a really nice faceplate with a lot of sparkly colors. Very, very nice build, kind of actually what you would expect at around, I think this one's about $1,100. So you're definitely expecting a very high quality build, and there is some special things going on there behind the mesh and the nozzle, which is a little bit hard to see. But yeah, I would guess that there are some specialized, customized tuning elements that Lime Ears has used before that are kind of sitting there behind the mesh and the nozzle. So you also do get a 2-core copper colored cable, very, very nice cable, as you would expect. I always give brands credit for using 2-core cables. I like 2-core cables. You don't see them as often in lower price sets, so it's always nice to get a high quality, slightly thicker, very nice looking copper colored 2-core cable with nice hardware on it. This one is actually done quite well. So we'll kind of jump into it there and say, what is it? This one is about a kilobuck 6-driver hybrid. So I think it's $1,100, as I said. 6 drivers. There is a 7mm titanium diaphragm dynamic driver. There is 2+2, so 4 balanced armatures in the mid, so 2 lower, 2 upper for the midsection. And then in the higher, ultra high, they call it ultra high, so high treble, there's a Knowles RAU BA unit. So I'm not sure if that's the one that is sitting in the nozzle, but there is a special Knowles there to handle the higher end of the frequency range. So when we look at the graph, it actually looks kind of really nice and smooth, kind of what you would almost expect at about a $1,000 set, a very refined, very smooth, very polished style tuning, and that's kind of what you get here. And I would say just to remember about the bass shelf, and it looks like it's a, kind of a high sub bass presence, and I would say just remember that's a 7mm dynamic driver. So while this looks like it's about 10 dB in ear, in presence, how the bass is actually there within your tracks, it's not like a 10mm at 10 dB. It's not quite like that. So it'll actually sound a little bit lower, and I'll kind of call it neutral bright a little bit later for that reason. But I would say this 7mm dynamic driver in particular, the way this is tuned, it's really there for a sense of depth, a sense of contrast to really balance out this upper end over here. And it does that quite well. I think they picked a nice dynamic driver they've actually used before. So nice pick on the low end just to kind of fill in, give everything nice sense of depth, to add a lower end to the contrast, this whole upper end, which is a little bit boosted. And then when you go into the mid bass, do a very clean mids, right? So dip out into the mid bass. Very, very typical, not quite hitting the Harman target, but definitely dipped. And that's going to give you just a slight bit of warmth. But mostly it's going to give you a very clean style midsection. And then as you swoop up into here, nothing too forward, but still give you a very energetic vocal, which is kind of just touching or just below the Harman target. So you're getting a nice amount of energy here for female vocals, but a little bit less shout because you're not on the Harman target or above the Harman target. And then as you roll over into the mid treble and the upper treble, kind of boost out these, and I would call it showing off. But I think they are clearly raising the level out here just to show off this Knowles unit and what it can do out there, and still provide an increased kind of a boosted amount of energy, but without it going way off. Like some of them will kind of boost and you'll see them kind of cut straight across, and there'll be a big spike out here. It's very, very nice to see something that kind of is a little bit more energetic but still rolled off. That becomes a little bit more natural, and it doesn't have that over boosted sound to it. So again, just a lot of thoughtful choices and tuning that you would expect on a higher end, more expensive style set. So the difference between a typical 1+5 at $300, something maybe like Odyssey and Terra. And again, it kind of comes down to those things that I was just talking about. A lot of it is just polish and refinement and reveal everything, show off in a tasteful way. they pick very nice drivers, and they want each one of these sections to be heard in kind of equal parts, and that's exactly what they did, and it's a very, very nice tuning. But you can tell it's been polished and refined. There aren't really any sharp edges to it. There aren't really any bright spots to it. It's just a very smooth style tuning, as you can kind of see on the graph. Sound, and again, because it leans into the upper range, because this part is just a little bit boosted, it almost sounds neutral bright or neutral brighter. Very clean, hear everything style. It's a set where it not only shows off the driver selection, but your source, right? Everything is kind of open and revealed here in the mids. You're definitely going to hear the resolve in your source, the resolve in the drivers. A lot of the attack, a lot of the decay, a lot of the speed, a lot of those things that you're looking for in higher end balanced armatures kind of comes across right there. There is no extra sub bass here from a 10 millimeter dynamic driver at 10 dB. You don't have that kind of veiling and booming or bloating or whatever would happen on maybe a more inexpensive set. This is a tight 7 millimeter there that is probably going to sound like this, but that is not really going to veil or mask or really cover up anything from here all the way out through the upper range. It's done very, very well in that style. So the bass, again, the heavier sub bass here is really there to counter the upper range. The mid bass is dipped for clean mids. The mid bass actually does remind me of Let Sure style tuning. It provides some presence, but no distractions. It's a softer style impact. And part of that is part of it is that the actual level of the mid bass is a little bit lower. Part of it is it's a 7 millimeter dynamic driver. It's just not going to move that air that a 10 millimeter does. It's not going to have that sharper impact that a 10 millimeter does. It's not going to have that sharper impact that a slightly boosted mid bass style tuning is going to have, but it is going to give you very clean style mids, and that's exactly what you're going to get here. But I would say the same thing about Let Sure style. This style always sounds really nice on certain genres of music. It sounds perfectly fine because you get a very, very nice solid transition from sub bass through mid bass. There's nothing out of place. It just kind of sounds very linear in that way. It's a really nice glide, but it tends to lack a little bit of tactility. It lacks that sharper impact. It kind of lacks that bit that makes something being hit that sounds like it's being hit. And I would say the same thing about their sets. I would say the same thing about this one. I think 7 millimeters are fine for this style, but to get that tactility, you need something that's going to move a little bit more air to sound a little bit sharper. So on the mids, again, very clean. There's just a touch of warmth to prevent the dry, sterile sound. And it really leans into the technical capabilities of the two lower, the two upper. Sounds like the most thoughtful, refined area of Terra. The balance of sounding BA natural, but also technically capable kilobit hybrid. And I think this is one of these things that's a little bit different than a $300 hybrid. They use a 4-way crossover. So I think you are getting kind of this bass, getting 1, 2, 3, and then there's kind of a 4 that's kind of out here. That 4-way crossover is just slightly different than what you would get on a cheaper hybrid. And I think it does just give you a little cleaner, more refined, more polished version of lower mids, upper mids, and having them sound a little bit more natural, a little bit more resolved, a little bit more detailed on a hybrid in this style. And again, it's just a very subtle difference, but I think it is a difference. And it's kind of what I noticed about Terra kind of right away out of the box. The midsection is very, very clean, very detailed, very resolved, kind of more than you're expecting for a 1+5, especially if you've heard $300 1+5s. It's just a little bit better. Everything is just kind of slightly polished. All those edges are taking off, all the edges are off, and you don't really have any obscurance or masking or veiling. Just very, very, someone spent a lot of time kind of scrubbing this one down, so it sounded very, very clean. So rather than showing off, the mids are revealed, like I said, the lower mid bass, slightly lowered ear gain. Again, this is actually a pretty energetic upper mid, but it's not really pushed. It's not pushed forward. They kind of rise at about 2.5, kind of what you would expect it in lots of other sets. They could have rise a little bit early. They could have moved that a little bit more forward. But again, they kind of lowered this down, pushed this just up to the edge. That is a very revealing style midsection. No sub bass to cover it. This isn't really boosted like a 16K that is going to cover that. Again, everything is kind of done as it should be. So when we get into the treble, and again, I would say the treble is very much a preference, and some people would prefer different style. Like I'm not a big 5K fan. When you go off of the Harman Target and the treble, I would say that is showing off a little bit. They obviously used a very nice Knowles balanced armature. They bumped the level a little bit, so that is very present. The upper treble, ultra high frequencies are definitely a little bit more present than you would get on some other hybrids. And, that is a preference. Some people will enjoy this amount of energy out here. Some people will say it's a little bit too much on the genres that they listen to. But I would say it sounds a lot like the Graph. It's a bit super extended. It really shows off the Knowles BA. But again, it's very much a preference. Some people enjoy it. Some people will find it a little bit too energetic on instruments that they listen to, on their tracks and their genres. But again, I would say it's a very interesting level chosen by Lime Ears. It's enough to be noticeable, but it can also be dialed in with tips or source. This, and again, our couplers aren't super accurate all the way out here. When you listen to it, there's clearly some extra energy out here, but is it 1 dB, is it 2 dB, whatever it is, I think they picked a level of extra energy that it can be dialed in with either tips or your source. If your source isn't as flat or has a little bit of roll off at the top end, this will sound, quite nice, maybe a little bit warmer because you'll get a little bit more presence out here. On my toppings, which are kind of flat out here, it definitely sounds like they're showing off the balanced armature and the ultra high frequencies. And, I can admire that. They picked a really nice driver. They've got a tuning that works end to end, and it doesn't sound out of place. It still sounds coherent end to end. So I don't have any problems with showing off in the way that they did it, but just be aware that it's not that hard to actually pull this in with some tips or your source or some other way to, just pull in the treble just a little bit and it'll sound, maybe closer to your preferences. But on the stage, again, there's just a lot of energy out here that is going to give you a nice big stage. You get a very clean middle section because of the mid bass, and this is kind of pushed up a little bit. Very clean midsection, very sharp imaging, kind of everything that you would pretty much expect at a set at this price is kind of there in the tuning, and it's not hard to kind of look at the graph and say, yeah, this one is going to be pretty much right on. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and thank you to Lime Ears for touring the sets. I got a couple others to get to, so I will do that, and I'll see you guys next time.